Chip, you had a little more hair in that picture. So did I a few years ago. I'm a fan of your clothing.
Thank you.
Lululemon's, that is. I haven't had a chance to sample the Kitten Ace, though the last time we were on CNBC, you did let me touch it.
Yes,
it is really good. It is called a technical cashmere, and we'll get to that in a moment. I want, however, I was going to wear shorts, you know that.
Yes.
But the powers that be thought it was just going to be too much skin on the set. And the shirt I brought, of all things, was not a Lululemon t-shirt, but it was an Under Armour shirt. And I didn't want to be sitting here with Chip with a duct tape over the Under Armour logo. But I do want to draw your attention to these styling trousers, which are Lululemon trousers, okay? We like? Good? They look good?
Yeah. I named these
These are known as the ABC pant. Do you know what ABC stands for? No. Would anyone else like to tell? He said always be comfortable. No. Anyone else want to hazard a guess? Probably. Anti-ball crushing. That is what these pants are. Chip, I didn't know that you were going to solve a problem that I didn't even know I had. Where did this come from? Well, and why that branding?
Well, that's interesting, because in the anti-ball crusher, when I named it that, ABC, I just wanted to call it the anti-ball crusher pant, but the company was getting big and it was scared about social media and what people would think, and so the last
you
thing
were afraid of what people would think?
Not
you.
Not me. No. And so they wouldn't call it that, so they call it the ABC pant. And I noticed just this last week, after 7 years, they finally decided to call it the anti-ball crusher pant.
Yeah.
And so, it's just part and parcel of like a company getting big.
Well, Chip, it works, okay?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It works. That's TMI, right? That's too much daggone information. Let's talk about your business history, and you, like a lot of entrepreneurs, you can't get the entrepreneurial bug out of your system. You keep going and going and going. You've had multiple careers, Lululemon, the one that is most famous, now Kitten Ace. You could have sat back and done nothing. What is it about entrepreneurs that makes them want to do it over and over?
I think there's a passion, of course, but there's an idea that comes to mind. So an idea that's not out there in the world, and you're right, I don't have to go to work another day in my life, but I go, is my idea right? Does the world actually want what I think it wants? And I can't stop from creating it to find out if what I'm thinking is true.
You want validation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is it an addiction?
Sure, it's an addiction. But absent that, what is there in life other than family?
Right. Let's talk about the origins of Lululemon going way back. Tell us when. Tell us what. And what I mean there is, what was the opportunity that you saw, or the problem you wanted to solve, and why did you think you were the guy to do it?
Well, because I came out of the surf skate snowboard business. In the snowboard business, that was when girls, because they were about 14, first started coming into athletics. And I started making first layer clothing for them. And I recognized that men didn't know how to set up a store, they didn't know how to buy from, and they knew nothing about athletics. So that was always in my mind, and I made these first layer pants, which, because it went through the wholesale system, were too expensive. And so I only sold 57 worldwide. So when I sold West Beach and I had a bunch of things that would make me want to do Lululemon, I'd had all these women around the world that were asking me for these pants. And I said, no, I can't do it. But then I remembered, at West Beach, I made $1 million a year on these two small vertical retail stores, and I lost $1 million on this global wholesale business. So I went, if I can deliver through the vertical business, then I can deliver those pants at a price that women will buy in volume.
So it was really the move from trying to sell through a lot of channels to having your own stores where you could focus on your products, do the stores your way, your products would stand out.
Yeah, and control the brand. Mm-hmm. But this is really the key, and the key is that it's a technical product. And going through the wholesale channels, I couldn't get the people that are working in like Dick's Sporting Goods or somebody to actually describe what the customer couldn't see, because so much of it was in the fabric or the construction. But going direct to the customer then and training people in the correct way in our stores, I could bridge that gap. And you'll notice that quickly after that, Apple and Tesla followed into that same pattern.
Their own stores, vertical, focused on their product and their product alone.
Technical product made beautiful, direct to the customer.
Technical. Is your company today, Kid and Ace, or the company you run with your wife and son, and would you describe Lululemon as a technology company as much as it is a retailer or a fabric company?
Well, I would first call Lululemon and Kit and Ace people development companies, leadership development companies. That's the number one goal, followed up by being a technical apparel company, yes.
What's the best advice you ever got as you were moving through at Lululemon and now? What's the best business advice you ever got? It can be advice you took or you didn't take.
Well, cash flow. So never grow beyond cash flow. I mean, I have tons of experiences which took me through that. Being in an oil company in Canada, went top and to the bottom out of cash flow. And when I was at West Beach, I could see where it was the wholesale business that was actually impeding my cash flow. When I was in vertical retailing, I knew I was getting cash every day.
How do you know you've got a cash flow problem? What are the numbers? What do you look at? Or do you just know?
Well, here's how it works, is that if I know that I pay all my suppliers in 7 days, and I do that because I get the best technology and I get the best sewers, I get the best delivery. If I don't have the money to do that, then I get none of those things and I get poor quality. So it usually shows up first off in poor quality.
So you see that first, and that's your tip-off that there may be a cash flow issue. So the best advice you ever got was to focus on cash flow.
Right. What
was the best advice or a piece of advice that you wish you had taken but didn't?
I'm a very trusting person. I think that's the basis of my personality. And the advice that I got, which didn't take, was, get an aggressive, good lawyer in your pocket. Because if as a leader, I know that if I'm good at one thing, and that's part of my trustworthiness, attracts a certain amount of people, then I've got to have somebody on the other side of me that isn't trustworthy, that can actually filter through people that beat the system by not producing a good product, but actually are working a Machiavellian system.
I would think, I don't know this, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I would think that a lot of founders of businesses or CEOs of companies feel that they need to know everything and be the expert on everything under their sun.
Sure.
Is that a temptation, do you think, for a lot of business owners? Or should the CEO know everything that's going on?
No, absolutely not. When I had West Beach, which was my surfskate snowboard company, I wanted to know everything. I had to be in every decision. And so consequently, it got to $15 million or so. And I was young, and that was a lot of money at the time. But it had hit the ceiling because I had to be there all the time. When I started, before I started Lululemon, I read a book called The E-Myth, which was about the entrepreneurial myth that entrepreneur has all the time in the world to themselves, they can control their own lives, and everyone knows that's a complete lie. But basically it was he said to set up the business as though it's a franchisable, so put all the systems in place and processes, and so that you can go out with your family on the weekend or you can go on holiday. And that's really how Lululemon became the ability to become highly replicable once I found out it was a world-class business.
So you need to know what you need to know, but other things you need to let go and let other people handle. How hard is that?
Well, once
you start doing it, I guess it gets easier.
Exactly. Once you start doing it and you see that instead of being in every decision, but changing to being a mentor and a trainer of quality people and seeing what it's like to release people and let them go. For me, it's actually the most exciting part of the business.
As you look back on your career and you think of, I'm going to ask you to think of 3 important things that you learned that business builders like the people in this room could benefit from knowing? And I'd like to ask it in a sort of staged way. And maybe you answered it when you talked about cash flow. But what is the most important thing a startup business builder needs to know? What is the most important thing as you move from that startup phase into the scale-up phase? What do you need to know? And then what do you need to know once a business is at scale and mature so that you can keep building it, keep it growing? So from early to middle to late, what are the things that you need to concentrate on?
Because I'm not that sharp, I'll probably lose track as I kind of go along.
I'll remind you.
But as you talk, to me, all three of them are combined because going back to the E-Myth again, when I set up the training, how to hire people, the quality systems, and so within that then was also what is the training and what is the culture within West Beach, Lululemon, Kit and Ace. And I based it on 5 things. And one was the Landmark course, which teaches about integrity, responsibility, and then the book Good to Great by Jim Collins about being great, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I imagine everyone knows, The Goal by Rosenblatt about lean production, and then The Psychology of Achievement by Brian Tracy. It's about 8 hours of CDs. Now, what this did, because I only wanted one store and I actually didn't want to work that hard, I set this in place, had all the employees listen to it, and then I found I could do it in 2 weeks, and I found I had the most phenomenal employees, like unbelievable, especially for 20 and 30-year-olds who are confused about their life, and it sets them in place. But the big picture, what I'm trying to say here, going through the 3 stages, is it sets up something called a linguistic abstraction. So it's a common set of terms, definitions that the company has, and I'd say I have about 25 of them or so, that no matter if you're in Tokyo, Munich, Vancouver, Denver, every employee understands what the meanings of those are, so the ability to communicate back and forth with trust and integrity is exponential.
And that is important at any of the stages of growth.
Correct. I don't think, once you break that bridge, then you end up with disparate companies.
I want to talk about the importance of the Landmark training, which was one of the hallmarks of Lululemon. Get you to spend a second on that. But I was in one of your stores where I bought these anti-ball crushing pants, and the young woman who was there, who was the manager of the store, I asked. I had just spoken to you on CNBC the day before, and I said, I don't mean to name drop, but I was just talking to Chip. The other Chip Wilson, who I didn't call you Flip Wilson. Give me credit for that, okay? And I said, how long you worked with the company? She said, 6 years. She was the manager of the store. Her name was Zoe. And I said, so you must love it. And she said, I love this company. I said, what do you love about it? She said, I love the culture of the company. And a lot of business leaders talk about creating a culture, and to some people from the outside, that feels like an abstraction, okay? It feels like something that's a little bit up there in the clouds and so forth. How does culture translate to the bottom line?
Well, I had this statement about giving without expectation of return. And there's something about being a person like that I think the law of attraction kicks in, and people want to be around people that are willing to give without expectation of return. So when people came to Lululemon and Kit and Ace, instead of waiting for them to show up as good employees and then training them to be great, we would assume that they're great right off the bat, but they just need the tools. So as I was saying, these 20 and 30-year-olds are showing up to work, but really 40% of their brain is being taken up by, will I ever get to travel? Will I ever be able to buy a house? What happens when my parents get old? Will I ever be able to retire? All these things, 40% of the brain power. So to be able to calm that brain down and give these people direction, one, they succeed in life because we set it up so there's a plan for them to get to what they want to get in life, and then they succeed at it.
How do you pick the right people? How do you hire? What do you look for? Someone who's going to work in one of your stores. What do you want?
Well, for me, I have to draw a line somewhere. People always thought that Lululemon was in the wellness business, but I'm not even a little bit. Like that's, to me, if you're in the wellness business and you're trying to make people healthy, and that means they're sick. So Lululemon's really in the Jim Collins book again. We're in the good, people are good, and we're out to make them great.
You're out to make them great. Tell me about a mistake you made as you went on your entrepreneurial journey, one that you learned from, something that would help the people in this room.
Yeah. Let's say the big mistake I made was I had recognized this new market that had never existed before, and it was a 25 to 35-year-old educated, professional, stylish, traveling, athletic woman. And because I learned that 60% of women graduating out of university were women in 1998, and I knew it was going to transform the world. And so in retail, women had never been given a good job because it was really a dumping ground for women that were working for minimum wage that were going to go and have babies. And I knew that was going to change. So not only did we hire these highly educated women who would be direct conduits to who our direct market was, but I was out to train them to be the best leaders in the world. And in fact, that did happen, and we made many of them multimillionaires. But they came in at 22, and by the age of 32 or so, we had matured. And so because we'd matured, we needed people with experience. So people that were 45, 50 started coming into the company, and we hired women at that era. Now, the women that were in Lululemon, I call them the super girls, and I call these women that came into the company super power women. And they really had to fight through the whole man issue. Then they really had to fight tooth and nail. And they learned all the corporate backstabbing, the Machiavellian principles, and so when they got hired, one of their principles was not to train anyone under them to take over their job. I think it was just self-preservation.
These were the power women?
The power women.
They had already had experience.
Yeah, they'd
been burned,
exactly,
knifed, whatever.
Right. And they had a way of operating. I don't even think they knew how they were operating. But what they didn't do is they didn't train and develop these super girls that were now 32 to be the next level. And so at some point when the company started failing about three years ago and got rid of the CEO and maybe the 6 women under them, then these women that should have been developed and should have been the next stage of great executives didn't get promoted to that position, and Lululemon hired all men. And it's one of the things I'm very sad about.
I want to get to the audience. If we could bring up the lights, I'm sure you guys have some questions for Chip in the 10 minutes or so that we have left. That was a very interesting thing there, and it goes to the question of you've obviously departed the company. You now remain its largest shareholder. Do you regret taking Lululemon public?
Well,
obviously that's something that's probably way over the horizon for most of the people in this room, but maybe some already are thinking about it. But talk to me about that.
Yes and no. In the moment, it was my choice to do that. I had 2 older boys who I never really saw because I was working so hard at my first company, and in 2005 to 7, my wife and I had 3 boys under the age of 2. And I was determined that I wanted to spend...
You think you were working hard?
Yeah. She continues to tell me she was working hard, and she's right. But I wanted to be the father that I always wanted to be, with the white picket fence and be the football coach and all that type of thing. So, I chose that, well, if I was going to do Lululemon and I was on this rocket ship, it was going to be... I was not going to be a family man. So I chose then to go public. And of course, everything that kind of came with being public is exactly what happened. But probably my biggest mistake in it was I didn't understand that I needed a bigger board of directors than my private board of directors. No one really told me that. And within 3 months, we had to get all these new directors in. They weren't the culture of Lululemon. And when my two private equity guys who were the culture exited, I ended up with a board that didn't understand how the culture related to profits. And so that was then the downfall of what could have been the greatest company in the world.
All right, let's go to some questions from the audience. There's one right there, please.
Company culture is something that's talked about so often, and I feel that not a lot of people understand how to create it. You continue to talk about company culture, and do you think that it was your effectiveness in understanding how to lead millennials that resulted in the success of Lululemon?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear well enough. Can you?
Sorry, I'll repeat the question. And it's a little broad, but company culture is something that's discussed so much, and I feel that not a lot of people truly understand how to create a company culture that's going to attract the millennials, those 20, 30-year-olds that are trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, like you discussed in the talk. Do you feel that it was your effectiveness of being able to relate, understand, and read millennials that led to the success of Lululemon?
Well, let's be clear, like millennials are now, and I think in 1998 to 2010, it was a different generation. I think it was the time when pre-millennials. So I'm not pretending to be an expert at millennials, and in fact, I'm in business with my 27-year-old son, and I leave him to be the expert at that. And I think I would be out of my realm to talk about that. But definitely in the 2000s, there was a need for what they'd call balance of life. And so people went looking for, how much time do I want to spend on health, family, business? What I do know, starting in around 2008, 2009, is the amount of digital information coming across our boards was exponential, and very few people were fish that could see the water, so to speak. And there had to be a different context and a different way of defining balance. And so balance for me started to then come out of mindfulness and powering down, powering up, like you would have done an old hard drive, and understanding that balance is really choosing every moment of your life about what's the most powerful thing I want to do right now.
Is there another question? Go ahead. I'll repeat it if you just stand up and say it. Go ahead, stand up if you wouldn't mind.
Just a second, here we go.
So I have a comment followed by a question. So I've been to your stores in multiple cities over a long period of time, and I think it's safe to say that the traditional retail experience when you walk into a store, some employees are engaged, some aren't. You can tell who wants to be there and who doesn't. The consistent trend I've seen at your stores is, I would say 100% of employees I've interacted with are completely engaged, whether it be late at night, early in the morning, on a holiday, because your stores don't shut down. And I guess my question is, as you grew, because initially when you were smaller, I understand by you creating the culture, you can teach, train, develop people. But how did you prevent it from eroding over time? Because again, I've been 50, 60 cities, your stores are everywhere, it's very consistent.
Well, there's two very key people that, one is Suzanne Conrad, who has a company called iGoal and she coaches Lululemon managers, especially where they're blocked or they're not getting what they want, and they don't understand what it is about their personality that they can change or choose in order to get through that block and go forward. And the other person is Delaney Schweitzer, who is the EVP of retail operations, e-commerce for right from the beginning of Lululemon up until she quit about 6 months ago. And these people they lived for giving without expectation of return and setting up that culture. So part of it then, now that I'm at Kit & Ace, the first person I hired was somebody who I was making sure that the culture stayed at the head office as well as the retail stores, because these two things can't be separated. And I think this is an issue at Lululemon right now.
You are known, as part of the culture you created, you are known to be a stickler for punctuality.
Yeah.
You are on Lombardi time. 5 minutes early is late, right? Why is punctuality so important? And if you're not punctual, what breaks down derivatively?
Well, let's be clear. I'm kind of like a born-again smoker or born-again Jesus freak. I was probably the worst person in the world around integrity. So I talk about it a lot to keep myself in check. So I was a competitive...
You're recovering.
I'm recovering. So I was a competitive swimmer for 18 years or so. And so that's like 8 workouts a week, and you're on time for like all my life. And when I got into competitive swimming, I decided I am never showing up anywhere on time for the rest of my life. I was so done with it. And what I found 3 years later is I had no friends because I wouldn't show up for parties. I wouldn't show up for a date. I didn't care. And so nobody called me up again. So it took me about 3 more years to fix that up. But what integrity is really doing what you say you're going to do when you say you will do it. And if I can't get it done, then that's okay. You know, I can't always get it done because maybe my mom goes in the hospital and I can't make a meeting. But it's my responsibility to clean the mess up that is incurred from me not being integrity. So if I had to be at that meeting and I couldn't make it, then I need to go call those people and go, okay, I'm reset a new date, and then what do I have to do to recover my integrity with these people? And actually by recovering the integrity and doing what needs to get done to clean up my mess, I actually show up as a person with more integrity.
Let me talk about, just ask you a little bit about money. I think I can anticipate your answer here. Is the desire to make money a good reason to go into business? That's question one. And question two, has having money changed you?
I think some people love the game of making money. And I think that then they look for a business that will make the money, and that's exciting. So I think that's one type of person. I mean, I definitely fall into the other type of person where I would have done what I did 18 hours a day for 100 years. And if as long as I could feed my family and get to work and keep clean.
For you, as we talked a moment ago, it was the nourishment of having your idea validated.
Exactly, sure.
That was what was more. Has money changed you?
No, I don't think. You could probably talk to anybody that knows me, and I have not changed one bit, because it's not what motivates me or drives me.
Another question? Is there somebody else? Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Over here.
Yes.
There you go.
Is this on? Hey, good afternoon. My name is Jaron Brewer. Really glad to be here. Thank you for coming out. I wanted to ask you, earlier you mentioned that part of your success has come from having trust in your team, and I was
having what? I'm sorry.
Having trust in your team.
Having trust in your team, and I was really interested to know: is that why you made the decision to leave the board of directors of Lululemon?
No, I made the decision to leave the board of directors because to do this is really interesting. To have a board and a public company, you have to have 3 committees, and you have to have the type of people that want to be on committees and who are more quantifiable driven, okay? So then if you don't want any more than 8 or 9, 10 people at the most in any kind of meeting, but in order to fill the committees, you basically have to have 8 people that are quantifiable driven. And they want to see numbers, and they cannot understand a vision or a future or things that cannot be quantifiable. So a public board does not allow for a visionary. And I think there's nothing more clear than when I saw the Apple movie with Steve Jobs. And you could see that the board is driven to margins or costing or something that's totally irrelevant to the big picture. And so if I was to redo a board of directors, I'd make sure I had A and B class shares, and I'd make sure I had at least 4 people on there that were entrepreneur visionaries that could control the quantifiable board of directors. Yes. Oh, go ahead. Right here.
Go ahead, please.
I consider myself part
Yep.
And my question to you is this. Did you have any anticipation that Lululemon would reach the younger girls? I have a daughter, and she's been in your store since she was 9. And so my question is, when you had your strategy and you did your market research for your demographic, had you any awareness that these younger girls were going to populate your stores as well?
It wasn't important to me. And I say that my target market was a 30-year-old professional, athletic, single woman who owned her own condo and traveled. I could care less about the 29-year-old or the 31-year-old from a branding point of view. Now, what I did know is that the 30-year-old woman is iconic for women that are 20 and women that are 40. And I also knew that looking at the landscape of athletic wear, there was no segmentation of market segmentation between old, young, religion, race, whatever. Athletics is athletics is athletics, and it hits everybody.
Let me conclude before we go to lunch. Maybe we'll go a couple more minutes. I'll take one more question over here. Up front, go ahead.
Hello?
Go.
So I work in branding and design. I just had 2 quick questions.
You work in design?
Branding and design.
Okay, great.
How did you decide on Lululemon? Obviously, it's a little bit longer of a name and stuff, so it's just interesting to me that you went with that. And then also...
How did I decide on Lululemon?
The name.
Yeah,
okay,
the name.
great.
Let's
Okay.
pick the name.
And then, obviously, everybody knows who you are today as a brand in terms of your identity. But in the early days, when you were just 1, 2, 3 stores, how did you kind of control who you were as a brand and get that identity across to your customer?
Okay. I'll tell everyone loves the story of why I named it Lululemon, so I'll start with that. When I had West Beach, my Surfskate snowboard company, I had a skateboard brand called Homeless. And I sold it for 3 or 4 years, and I was doing quite well in Japan with it and Europe. But snowboarding was taking off, and that's where the margins were. And I went, skateboarding's on its way down. I'm not gonna do it anymore. And what made it even more special is I couldn't trademark Homeless because HOM is French for male, and there was too many names out there like that. So I went to the distributors around the world and I said, I'm not doing Homeless anymore, and that's the way it is. Well, the next year, showing the Japanese the snowboard brand, and after they do that, they go, Mr. Chipsan, we're Homeless. I said, I told you guys I'm not doing it, gave them the reason again. Next year, same thing. Mr. Chipsan, we're Homeless. And I said, I'm not doing it, so that's that. Though they called me up a couple months later, and this is when, again, I'm in the wholesale business, so cash flow is like hurting all over, and any kind of money is good. And they go, Mr. Chipsan, we want to buy name Homeless from you. And I went, well, I'm not using it. I'm not making it. It's complete error. And the Japanese yen is at a complete high. They're buying Pebble Beach in every building in New York they can. And so I gave them a price I thought was ridiculous. And they went, okay. And I went, Jesus, that's the easiest money I ever made in my life. And so after that, and I sold West Beach, and I started to think in my mind, well, why did they love the name so much? And it's because the letter L is not in the Japanese language. And Japanese wanted only American brand names. And so the 5 big trading companies in Japan were coming up with all these American brand names to sell to their Japanese customers. But because Homeless had the letter L in it, I understood that the core customer thought of Homeless as being a more authentic American brand because it had an L in it, because no Japanese firm would come up with a name with an L in it. So then I went to myself and went, so now I'm going to start, I need to come up with a name with 3 L's in it, so if I ever sell that company, I can get 3 times as much.
Final question. You have been critical of the current 3L company, its board, its management. Do you want your company back? And whether you do or you don't, what's the one thing you think that the current team there needs to do that they're not doing?
Well, it's grossly underperformed the market in the last 3 years. Under Armour and Nike are 50 and 80% above the market. S&P has been 19% above Lululemon. I mean, Lululemon's actually dropped, maybe 14 or 15% to the S&P over the last 3 years. So something's very, very wrong in the midst of the largest change in the way people are dressing in the history of the world. So it's way underperforming. So then you go, well, if it's been underperforming for 3 years, it's really 4.5 because a lot of decisions get made, prior to that. So if that's not working, then then it's got to be the board. It's not the CEO, it's the board of directors because the board of directors nominates the CEO. If it's the board of directors is underperforming, why? Well, it's got to be because we can't vote for the whole slate because only 3 members come up a year.
So staggered terms.
Staggered board, and they're protecting themselves, because they're doing such a lousy job. So then you kind of go, well, who's responsible for that? And you go, it can only land right on the Nominating and Governance Committee for, again, not declassifying the board and not changing the board in order to assess what a good CEO is, in order to take advantage of the biggest change in the way people are dressing in the history of the world.
So the answer is you would change the governance structure of the company if you went back.
Right.
Do you want it back?
No, I don't think they can afford me. And, but they should, this is what I say, if they're paying, if they paid me $100 million a year maybe, but, and I could make it billions and billions, but, they'd prefer to pay somebody $2 million a year to lose money. So, that's just the way a public structure works.
We're going to end it on that note.
Yeah,
Chip,
sure.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.